Hey, Ravanna. Hey, I'm not sure if you are as excited about getting back together in person as I am, but I'm pretty darned excited about it. The distance has reminded me of how thankful I am that we are in the same church together, that we are a part of the same family together. It's reminded me of how much I enjoy seeing each one of you from week to week, and I can't wait for us to get back together. And speaking of getting back together in person, Virginia has begun to lift restrictions on gatherings, and the restrictions on church gatherings are more lenient than other institutions or other businesses, and that means that we can begin to think about what it means to have a phased in-person reopening for our church. We can begin to think about how that will look and how that will fit with our particular church, with our particular church's makeup. And now the most difficult part in all of this is that we have people who think vastly different thoughts about reopening. Okay, I know that, and I'm very aware of this. There are some that were ready to reopen last week. Why aren't we open now? There are some that are not going to be comfortable for meeting in person for a very long period of time. And there are legitimate reasons for that. Some of us are caring for elderly parents, and we have that to think about. And so the thought of participating in a phased reopening does not delight us as much as it might otherwise. Some of us have elderly parents in town that we want to still continue to be able to see, and if we have that extra contact, we won't be able to do that. That's a legitimate reason for not being more cautious in not participating as much in a phased reopening. Some of us have compromised immune systems. Some of us have small kids, and the thought of social distancing your kids from other kids is a daunting task. And I understand all of this, and that will make us more cautious about participating in a reopening. But the first thing I want to say about the potential reopening is this: it is inevitable. It is inevitable that we will have different views and different positions about this. And because of that, the most important part of a reopening is that we have grace for one another. Okay, that those who are ready to jump in with both feet and they're ready to lick all the doorknobs, that they have grace for the people who are more cautious about a phased reopening. And the people who are more cautious about a phased reopening are gracious towards those who are really missing community and ready to take more risk in order to participate in that. And so with regard to having grace with one another during this time of transition, I've attached an article in the email that I sent to you, and I'll also put it in the description below. And the article has just a wonderfully godly perspective on how churches reopen and the hearts that we have with the different perspectives in our church with regard to that. I'd encourage you to read it, and I'd encourage you to pray through it and align your heart with that godly perspective that's found in that article. But whether you're gung-ho about meeting or very cautious about meeting, the church is going to have to make some tough decisions about it, and it may align with how you feel, and it may not align with how you feel. And the church is going to have to make some tough decisions, and we're going to make mistakes along the way. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. I've never been through a pandemic before, and as I'm sure you haven't either. But let me give you some kind of understanding of what this might look like and the heart behind the kinds of things that we're deciding. First of all, we will be following all of the guidelines offered by the Governor's Office and the CDC for churches. In case you're wondering what those are, I've provided a link to that in the email that I sent to you, and I'll also put that in the description below. The second is we are going to try our gosh darndest to accommodate every comfort level in terms of providing a meaningful, thoughtful, worshipful Sunday morning service. Okay? And what that means is that any of the options that we talk about will have a live streaming component so that those who don't feel comfortable coming to church have a meaningful, thoughtful, worshipful Sunday morning service, and they can be a part of what we're doing together. That is one of the main goals that I have through all of this, is that each one of us feels like we are a part, that each one of us it gets reinforced that we are a family, whether we are comfortable going to be a part physically or not. Okay, and so those are that's one of the main considerations here. Lastly, we have not yet decided how we are going to do this phased opening. There's a lot of discussion going on. There are a lot of great ideas going on. Some of those ideas include having church out in the field at church. Some of those ideas include having a limited number of people in the sanctuary, and then maybe some people in the field as well, and we can stream it out there so we can have a watch party out there. But of course, every one of these options includes a streaming portion that will go to your homes if you desire to participate that way. It may include, driving up in cars. We're thinking through some of these options. We may try a couple of them, but I want you to know the kinds of things that we're thinking. In terms of timeline, the biggest factor is being prepared. Okay, there was a big technological hump to overcome in order to put our church services online and figure out how we're going to distribute that and communicate and all of that. And we're entering into a new phase of technological learning as we begin to figure out how is live streaming going to work for Ravenna? How is it going to work for you? And we want to do that well. Okay, now I don't want to do it well because Ravenna is vain. I want to do that well because I want those of you who are at home worshiping with us, who are not comfortable coming to church, I don't want you looking at like a 1-inch figure on the screen that you can barely hear, right? I want you to have a meaningful, thoughtful, worshipful Sunday morning service as well. And so that takes time. It's going to take some time for us to learn. It's going to take some time for us to grow. So that's one of the biggest time factors, is how are we going to overcome this technological hump? I have no doubt that we're going to overcome it. I have no doubt that God's going to have us overcome it well. It's just going to take a little bit of time. The second is we want to prepare the building to follow the suggestions coming from the governor's office, and that's going to take some time as well. And once we get that under our belt, those two things under our belt, we'll start to phase in some kind of in-person meetings for those who are interested. Because of those two factors, I wouldn't expect us to begin a phased-in transition for, at the earliest, 2 or 3 weeks. And so in the meantime, keep checking your inboxes on Sunday morning. We're going to keep producing those Sunday morning services that we can participate in together. And they'll be on Facebook as well and YouTube. But Ravenna, in the meantime, I want to encourage you to stay strong in the Lord. I want to encourage you to continue to connect with one another and reach out to one another and be the body of Christ towards one another. I want to encourage you that God is still on His throne. And I want to encourage you that your church loves you and is busy preparing for the next phase of our life together amid this COVID crisis.